Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 4th February 2024, where we will be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now looking at the table of contents, we find that the very first article is about fiscal consolidation, and because this is regard to the recent budget, and we will be discussing about the various concepts in the same. In the next one, we will be discussing about the Places of Worship Act and the various provisions and the issues right now. Next, we will be going on to discuss about the governor's role in federalism regarding to a recent debate in the policy circles. Next, we will be trying to understand the various types of national award in the backdrop of L. K. Advani being conferred the Bharat Ratna. And finally, we will be concluding the discussion with a very innovative device in disaster management that is known as the NITISH device, and we will be discussing about the same. Now starting with the very first article, we will be discussing a very important concept that is known as fiscal consolidation, and in the same we will be discussing other various important components, especially of budget, of fiscal deficits and the various effects of the same. This is in context because right now the Union Finance Minister recently presented the budget, and there were various highlights of the budget that we discussed also, right, in the previous analysts, and also we have seen what were the new schemes and policies. And also one very important aspect that we saw from the budget is that the government is now seeking to reduce its spending and also directly trying to reduce its fiscal deficit. So we will be in this article discussing the same because in UPSC GS3 Mains General Studies 3 paper, the aspects of Indian economy and the various issues related to planning, development and employment and mobilization of resources are one of the most important topics. There have been PYQs in the same. Now coming to the very basic concepts first, we already discussed some things before also, but let me start everything afresh. See, the government of any nation is a public institution, right? It needs to do many welfare activities, welfare schemes, right? And also it needs to do some capital expenditures on, say, roads, highways, airports and so on. So government on its own need to have some expenditures, right? Do you all agree with me? So governments always have some expenditures apart from these welfare schemes and capital expenditures. The government also have to do some routine activities, such as if the government has taken some loans, it has to pay interests. If the government is employing our own future bureaucrats who are watching the video right now, right, they have to pay you salaries. So salaries to the government servants are also a reality. So these are the expenditures, one of the few expenditure sides which I discussed. Now, apart from the same, the government also has some income sources, which we call the same as government revenue. The very sources from where government can earn some money. The sources are, for example, tax, non-tax such as fees and fines and penalties. There are other sources such as selling capital resources of the government, such as PSU ownerships and so on. So these are the aspects. Now we have to understand our own Indian government and also all of the nations all around the world are public institutions, and it is generally in the interest of the public that the government has to do some expenditures routinely, and that is why the governments often find, and it is very quite natural, that the expenditure side of the government is more than the revenue side, or what the government is spending is actually more than what the government is actually earning. Now that is what we actually know as something known as deficit. Now there are various calculations of deficit. In this particular discussion we will be focusing on fiscal deficit. Now what is fiscal deficit? This is nothing. It is just the difference between the total expenditure minus total receipts, and this is accounting for borrowings. That means fiscal deficit just means that if the government is spending more than it is earning, so where will the government have the resources to finance that gap? That gap will be coming from borrowings. So the government have to borrow from somewhere, right? Now government is borrowing something to actually fill up that expenditure gap, and this is very different. The concept of fiscal deficit is very different from national debt. National debt just means the absolute number. For example, say the government has taken 100 rupees loan. Now this is actually what is known as debt. And say the government's GDP in a particular year is 1000 rupees. For example, we are assuming that the total output GDP is 1000 rupees. Now what is the percentage of the same here? It is 10%. So we will be saying that fiscal deficit is around 10% of GDP. So fiscal deficit is different from national debt in matters when fiscal deficit is actually calculated as a percentage of the GDP, whereas national debt, right, which can be internal, external and so on, this is actually an absolute number such as this. So this is the primary difference I need all of you to be clarified of. Now there are some factors for government to fund its fiscal deficit. So I told you, right, the government has to fund that gap through borrowings. Now how can government do? The very first thing that government can do is going to its public or its citizens such as you and I and everyone else. So there are all of us right here, right? The government will be saying, okay, I am a very trustable institution. I am the government. I am the part of the authority that derives its power from the people. So I am very trustworthy. Government will always be there in the economy, in the market, in the administration. So government will never fail. So what I can do is I can raise some bonds. Bonds are some debt instruments that the government can tell, okay, the people, you can do what? I need money right now. So the people, you can do what? You can give your money, and in return I will be giving you something known as interest, right? To simplify our explanation and understanding, I am explaining in a very, very simple way, right? So in this particular way, the government can tell the public, okay, you give your money, right, and I will be giving you bond which will be paying you some interest rates apart from the principal amount that you have lent me. So this is a particular way where the government is directly raising money, directly borrowing money from the people. So this is actually something also known as the primary markets, or where the government is directly dealing with the people by selling bonds. Now what the people did, people actually gave all their money to the government, that is the borrowing, to fund its fiscal deficit. Now government can do something else also, a very, very clever thing, that is actually known as open market operations, OMOs, by the RBI. Now what the government can do, it can tell that the RBI, you do what? You print fresh money, you print fresh rupee currency, whatever you say, to do what? To give it to the people. And when the people will be having, this is something operating in a different way. How? The RBI will be buying those government bonds with the government sold in the very first place through primary markets, right? Now the RBI will be doing what? It will be buying the same, and it will be supplying the rupee, or say the currency, to the public, right? So this is doing what? This is also a way in which the government, the RBI is actually buying back the government bonds. So indirectly we can say that the RBI or the central bank also lent money to the government. So please do remember, this is a direct one, this is an indirect one. And the most important observation that I want all of you to remember here, that this particular process of open market operation is creating fresh money, fresh currency in the economy. Okay, now there is another aspect of the same. Now when the government is borrowing, the government has to give some interest rate, right? Now can we tell that this interest rate is a cost of borrowing? Cost of borrowing for the government, right? We can say that interest rate is a cost of borrowing. Now have this example. Now if the people are giving the money to the government, right, and we can see the overall supply of money in the economy is decreasing, right, and this is one of the cases where the interest rates rise, and when the interest rates rise because of lack of money in the economy, the cost of borrowing for the government also increases. This is one aspect. The second aspect of interest rate is when the government is borrowing too much. It is borrowing too much because it is having too much gap, because it is having too much expenditure. Why it is having too much expenditure? Maybe the previous year the government had a fiscal deficit. Now the fiscal deficit is more than the previous year. So they have to increase their borrowings. Now this is a very, very important aspect, because I told you, right, when the government usually borrows, the government believes that it is a very trustable agency. Everyone trusts the government, but yes, when the government is borrowing too much, that trust declines, because the government's repayment capacity of the previous borrowings, they start falling down. And what this leads to? This leads to, the degradation of, say, the value of the government bond that the people have. So to have more new borrowings, the government has to offer higher interest rates, because right now the people do not trust the government too much, because the liabilities of the previous years are too much. So that is why This again will be leading to interest rates rise of the government bonds. That means more and more cost for the government. So that is why fiscal deficits are not good. So this was, few observations. Now there are some more observations, such as, the helicopter money. Imagine, a helicopter flying just above you. It is stagnant, above you. And what the helicopter pilot is doing, it is just dropping, huge amount of cash to the people below the helicopter. And you are one of the people. What you will be doing? You will be just rushing to collect the cash. And when you have gotten the cash, you will be telling, okay, right now I can go and buy that iPhone. Right now I can go and buy a lot and lots of chocolates, right? So you will be doing what? You're putting a lot of demand pressure on the market right now, because you have to understand the supply in the market is always limited. And if there is more demand, there will be something known as inflation in the economy. There will be high amount of inflation. And that is why we have to understand helicopter money, or the situation when the open market operation is actually taking place. This is creating new money, and new money is landing, or say, falling into the hands of the people just via an helicopter example, and this is creating more and more inflation. This is the second reason why, this particular fiscal deficit is not good. Next, we have to understand, suppose the government has a huge amount of fiscal deficit, and the government is telling, okay, RBI, you do OMO, but RBI is telling that no, inflation is right now very high, you have to do something else, I cannot give you money because there is too much of inflation. Now the government is, thinking something else. Now RBI is actually the government's banker. But apart from RBI, there are various commercial banks in the economy. So let us assume that the entire commercial banks are having 100 crores. For example, right? Entire, the commercial banks are having 100 crores to lend to anyone, to government, to you, to any business people, right? Now the government is telling, okay, right now I am having 20 crore of fiscal deficit. Banks, you give me money. Now what the, banks did, it lent out the money of 20 crores. Now assume, understand and appreciate one thing, that this entire pool of 100 crore was initially for everyone, for the government, private, business people, and for us also. Now after the government took a loan, it is reducing this pool of lendable funds to the public due to the action of the government. Now assume that in the next year, that the government is again having a high amount of fiscal deficit. What will happen? Then again the government will be going to the, RBI. RBI will tell no, too much inflation. RBI will, tell that it is not possible for me, you go to the banks. Now the government will go to the banks, again the banks will be giving, say, an extra 20 crores. Now only you can assume 60 crores is available to the people. So if less money is available to the people, what will be happening? There will be less amounts of loans taken by the business. You will not be very enthusiastic to, say, take an EMI for free, JC and everything, because whenever the pool of funds for the banks goes down, the interest rates goes up, because less amount of funds with the banks, high amount of interest. Because less amount of funds for the banks, huge amount of people are going into demand that small pool. So this is actually what is known as crowding out. When the government comes in, everyone goes out, and this particularly leads to higher interest rates. So this is the third aspect. The fourth aspect is known as Ricardian equivalence. Now to imagine Ricardian equivalence, and this is, let me tell you a term which is there in your NCERTs. So be very particular with your NCERTs also. If someone has read, you can tell me the page number also and the name of the book of the NCERT too. Now see, Ricardian equivalence is a very, very interesting phenomena. It tells that, for example, let us imagine that now COVID crisis is going on. So the government will be doing what? Government knows that the market is not functioning well. There is shutdown of the industries. There is high amount of people going out of their jobs due to COVID shutdowns, right? So the government will be assuming that, okay, people need my help. I have to do more government expenditures, give more rations, food items and so on. So the government will spend more. And how they will spend more? By borrowing more. But in the same time, assume that you and various other citizens of India are very clever. We all are very clever. We study well. We know economics. We know that if the government is borrowing now, the government has to take loans. And we all know that loans have certain principles and tenure, right? Tenure means the amount of time period for which you have taken the loan. Say the government has taken a loan of 5 years. Now say this is the year of 2020. Now in 2025, the government has to repay not only the principal but also pay a huge amount of interest on the loans taken. So what the government will be doing in 2025? It will be trying to pay it back. Won't you agree? It will be trying to pay it back, and it will be paying it back by what? By say raising the taxes. Because taxes is the biggest component of earning for the government. Income taxes, corporate taxes and so on. So you all or we all know in 2020 that this will be happening in 2025. So what will you do right now? You will be doing what? To save your taxes 5 years after. Right now you will be saving more. That means you will be saving more of your incomes. And this will be doing what? If you save more, it is not good for economics and not good for the economy too. Because if you save more, you won't be creating any demand. If there is no demand, the GDP will be falling. And this is very, very harmful. And this is actually what is known as Ricardian equivalence. So the government right now, if it is trying to borrow, it is totally equalizing this effect by reducing the GDP over a long period of time, because people will be saving right now. And this is not good for the economy. And also the final impact of this fiscal deficit is the ratings. Ratings means that there are some institutions internationally such as S&P, right, Goldman Sachs and so on, which try to rate the quality of government bonds. Now this quality of government bonds are very, very important for government to raise future loans. Now if the government is having high deficit, the government cannot take any new loans. And these rating institutions, these private companies all over the world, they will be studying the Indian government's position. And they will be doing what? They will be downgrading. They will be decreasing. They will be saying in these papers that Indian government, for example, is having high deficit and it may not be able to pay back the loan that you will be giving to the Indian government tomorrow. So all the private lenders, they will not be too much encouraged to give loans to the Indian government. Hence, considering everything, we need fiscal consolidation, or this is actually a set of policies by the government to actually decrease their expenditures and also, if possible, try to increase their revenues, right? And how can the government do? It can do by studying the components of the budget. We know that we have two components of the budget, that is the capital side and the revenue side. And also we have the expenditure and receipts in both of the same. So we have to understand in the revenue side what we can do. We can do something with the tax policy, such as we can increase the taxes, we can increase new taxes, introduce new taxes such as the carbon taxes with respect to pollution. We can also increase the tax base or the number of people who actually should be paying taxes. Next, we also can improve tax administration, such as implementing strict penalties to people who are avoiding paying taxes and increasing black money and so on. Next, also non-tax revenue can be increased. How? We can do what? We can sell government assets. This is actually a form of capital receipts, where the government is actually selling assets of PSUs, ownerships and so on. In return, government is getting money. Next, there will be some user charges for say electricity, parks and so on, which the government can raise. Next, the government can also have some dividends and so on. Note that this is not the limited one. There are many ways in which the government can increase amount of revenue. Next, the government can also target expenditure decrease by reducing spending on specific programs. Just the thing that the government in this particular budget did, it reduced the spending on some government schemes. Those who have watched the previous analyst, you can tell me in the comment section the names of the government schemes which the government has decreased the allocations for. Next, the government can also do some procurement reforms, or for example say the MSP, the government can plug in the loopholes related to corruption, leakages and so on. It will be also saving money. And also government can also increase the amount of public investment efficiency. These are the things that the government can do. Now in the same way, we have to understand these are the things that took place in the budget, that the government is trying to bring down the fiscal deficit to 5.1% of GDP in this particular financial year. The long-term target for the government is 4.5% of GDP by 2025. Despite the amount of increase of 11.1% of capital expenditure ambition, right? Now, how is government fitting the same? By reducing the amount of spending on 3F, food, fuel and fertilizer subsidies. We have all seen these, right? The government is trying to reduce the expenditure. The government is also expecting that the GST collections will be touching 1.6 lakh crore, 1.7 lakh crore in the coming months, right? And also we have to understand, the amount of direct tax collections from the corporate sector. The government is also having good aspirations on the same. But here we have to understand, having done these things are very good because these are tending to reduce the deficits. But on the other hand, we have to understand that if we focus too much on fiscal deficits, balancing the budget and so on, this is actually leading to lower expenditures, and lower expenditure means doing these things which can hurt the economy in long run. So that is why we have to understand the country has some welfare state obligations of giving services to the poor, the vulnerable sections. This will be hampered. Next, we also understand that economic growth means the incomes of the people are increasing. When the incomes of the people increase, their taxable income or the taxable obligations, they also increase. So we can tell that income taxes are a kind of an automatic stabilizer, because we have to understand when the taxes increase, the people actually spend less, irrespective of their increase of their incomes. So we can assume that taxes are already stabilizing the economy, because higher amount of income having higher amount of taxes, so people are actually paying taxes on higher incomes because of progressive taxation. But when we try to increase that further, then people will be not consuming the goods and services. Then their level of expenditure will be decreasing. Remember Ricardian equivalence, right? That is one of the aspects there. So taxes can be dampener to the economic progress going forward if the government of the day is focused too much on decreasing the fiscal deficit by reducing expenditure and increasing revenue such as taxes. The next article is regarding the Places of Worship Act, because in recent times we are seeing the emergence of this topic, especially with reference to Gyanvapi Mosque in Varanasi and the various aspects of the Allahabad High Court's decision, and also regarding the mosques which is present at Mathura. And in the light of this discussion, we will be trying to understand with respect to GS2 mains and the features of Indian Constitution why this particular incident is very, very significant. Now, to start with, we will be starting with some key terms first to strengthen your understanding. Now see, this act is known as Places of Worship. Now what do you mean by places of worship? We all know that India is a country belonging to many religious communities, ethnic communities and so on. The diversity of India is very, very rich, and this is just a testimony to the rich tradition of India's cultural history so far. And we have to understand in the same that over a period of time we had many religions proliferating out of our own country, and that is why they need some places of worship, right, to go to and to devote their time to spirituality and God. And that is why we have temples, mosques, churches, which are actually known as places of worship. Next, what do you mean by religious character? Now, can we appreciate the fact that a temple is a temple because it is having some deity or figure? It is also having some symbolic design, such as say, can anyone of you comment me the architecture style of temples of North and South India and let me know? So those styles are actually symbolic designs. Then also, can we appreciate the fact that the rituals which are conducted at a particular temple is actually very, very significant. Then also, the people who come and worship. Sometimes people come from other countries to worship at various temple, mosques, churches and so on. So these are all the constituents of that particular religious character to that particular temple, to that particular mosque, church and so on. So these two things are intrinsic to any particular place of worship. And we have to understand, coming to this present discussion, since late 1980s, the communal tensions and the aspirations of some groups of people were flared up, and that is what also gave birth to a particular movement, right, to actually revive the Ram Janmabhoomi dispute, which was actually centuries old. And we have to understand this debate was stirred up in the late 1980s, and this also not only was isolated to this particular place, but also this spread up to the demands for say creation of temples from existing mosques in various other parts of the country. Two prominent places where the Gyanvapi mosque, as we can see in this particular figure, this is actually according to various records, various history, according to even the Archaeological Survey of India, is actually built on the ruins of a temple, as you can also observe from this figure. Next, there is also this Shahi Idgah in Mathura, right, which we can see that this is the Krishna Janmabhoomi temple. This we can see here, and just in the periphery of the same, this particular mosque is present in the present day. That is known as the Shahi Idgah mosque. Now, these particular mosques were also turned or also brought in the dispute in the background of the debate of Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi debate. Now, we have to understand that back then in the late 1980s and in the early 1990s, the P.V. Narasimha Rao government actually saw this as a threat to India's communal endeavors and also to peace. And that is why the government thought back then that there must be a particular law to freeze the status of places of worship. Places of worship we have already studied. So what the government will be doing, it will be freezing the status. For example, say if it is a temple, it will be a temple, it is a mosque, the status of the religious character will be that of an Islam. So this is actually what do you mean by freezing of status. So what it did to say allay any fears of conversion of a particular mosque to a temple, and also there were various other allegations to actually stop the conversion of any particular religious particular place of worship to another particular religious place of worship, to stop that, to stop the level of communal disharmony, violence, conflicts, riots. The government brought in this particular act. What are the main features? The religious character of the particular place of worship will be the same as it prevailed on August 15, 1947. That is the date of independence. Some critics say that this date is very arbitrary. And this comes to our next point. That is, no person shall convert a particular, say, religious denomination, place of worship to another one. And this particular thing is totally prohibited, particularly because of the things that the government saw in late 1980s and 1990s, and right now the same disputes are ongoing. And all suits, appeals, etc. or other proceedings regarding conversion that are pending before courts or authorities on 15th August 1947 will abate. That means no further legal proceedings can be instituted. This is to reduce the number of disputes. And some critics also say that this is actually preventing the aspect of judicial review because the courts are being barred in this particular matter. There are some exceptions because the particular dispute of Ram Janmabhoomi was actually far back and had huge amount of significance, and that is why this particular dispute was kept out of the ambit of this law. That is an exception. Then all of the monuments and archaeological sites and ruins remains which are under this particular act, they were also exempted. Then this will not apply to any suit which were actually settled before the 1991 act. This is a very, very important thing. Please note that we will be needing this provision later. And also any conversion of any place which took by force or acquisitions will also not be considered under this particular act. This is also an exception. Now, the status of the particular thing that is related to our current affairs, as we can see individually in case of Gyanvapi and Shahi Idgah mosques, are as follows. See, according to the Gyanvapi mosque, the suits that were filed right into 1991, the suits or the civil petitions, they argued that the temple belonged to Lord Vishveshwar, and they alleged that there is an old temple at the center of the Gyanvapi compound, and it was actually ordered. The temple was actually demolished on the orders of Aurangzeb in around 1669, and so far the Allahabad High Court, which is inquiring and looking into the same dispute as of now, the court is telling that the act itself does not define what is religious character. It is not defining, it is left open, and this is one of the loopholes. And also the High Court is observing that the suits are only asserting that the right of worship of Hindu deities must not be hampered, and they are not seeking the right to convert the status of the mosque. They are just seeking the right of worship of Hindu deities in the particular area. So this is one aspect. Next, in the aspect of Shahi Idgah Mosque, this was, as we have also seen in the picture, just beside the Krishna Janmabhoomi temple, this particular mosque is located, and there were various disputes that the particular area was also seized and a particular mosque was built forcibly on the particular temple grounds, and that is where there were various civil suits, disputes over a period of time. And recently also, say after the independence of India, the two parties, despite their disputes of belonging to Hindu and Muslims, the two parties decided to compromise through a decree, and that was actually done in 1968. But later the Hindu groups, they alleged that this particular decree was a fraud that was not, say, based on total unanimous decisions of the both parties. So that is why this particular dispute is again challenged, and the district court is telling that this particular dispute is not again regarding conversion of status. This is regarding the dispute of that compromise decree, which the parties, particularly some particular parties, are telling that it was achieved by fraudulent manners. And because that decree was drawn before 1991 Act of, say, Places of Worship Act, it actually belongs to that exclusions. So this is the particular status of the two particular disputes. So you all are advised to keep a track of the disputes and also what is the final outcome of the same. But for our examination, we have to look at the provisions of the Act, the opinion of the courts in this matter, and the exception of the same. The next article in this particular aspect is the governor's role in federalism, where we have to understand in the Jaipur Literature Fest that is ongoing, there have been some experts which have renewed the debate of the role of governor in the federal aspects of Indian polity. Now, this is a very, very important debate with respect to UPSC means, because there have been questions directly and indirectly related to governor's role in the same. Now we have to understand some of the important constitutional aspects and provisions before we go on to analyze the rest of the article. The very first is the Article 153, where it is told that the governor has to be there in each state, and this should be appointed by the center. So this is the very first important article that we have to understand, that the governor is being appointed by the center. Next, Article 163 tells, and pardon me, this will be a narration of the same, and the bold highlighted words are very, very important for us to consider in the further discussion. See, Article 163 says that there will be a council of ministers with the chief minister as the head, and they will be doing what? They will be aiding and advising the governor in the exercising of functions of whom? The governor's function. That means the chief minister and the council of minister will be aiding and advising the governor, and the governor has to implement the same according to various Supreme Court judgments, and except insofar as to exercise the functions in his discretion, but also in various cases such as the Nibam Rabia case of 2016, the Supreme Court clearly told that discretion is not a total and a general discretion. It has to be in the rarest of rarest cases, and this particular discretion is not a general discretion. Next, in the Article 164, the chief minister shall be appointed by the governor, right? And other ministers shall be appointed by the governor on whose advice and aid, that is of the chief minister. And the ministers shall be holding office during the pleasure of the governor. Now, this pleasure of the governor, does this mean that whenever the government pleases, the government can say remove a particular minister? No. According to another Supreme Court case, the governor, this particular article has been read in such a way to construe that the governor has to abide by the advice of the chief minister. That is, the pleasure of the governor is not of the governor, but of the chief minister. This is a very, very important observation here. Next, according to Article 174, the governor can also summon, prorogue, dissolve the legislative assembly, but again, this particular is contingent on the aid and advice of the council of minister, and this is because council of ministers are actually representative of the assembly. They are the representatives of the people. They have been democratically elected, and that is why any function related to this particular state legislative assembly has to be done on the advice of the Council of Ministers. And Article 200, a very, very important one, the article which actually stirs up a lot of debate. This says that every bill passed in the state legislative assembly has to be sent to the governor, and the governor has 4 options: to give assent to the bill, to withhold assent, to reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. Remember, this is a constitutional discretion of the same, and return the bill to the legislature, asking it to say reconsider, also may be proposing some amendments. So these are the particular aspects of the same, and again there are many Supreme Court cases here which advises the governor to exercise the discretion in respect to this particular article very, very carefully. Now there are some allegations here. The allegations, the very first one is the clash of neutrality, because governor is appointed by the central government in a particular manner of a tenure of 5 years, and particularly this is also according to the pleasure of the president, and indirectly the Prime Minister and the Union Council of Ministers. We have to understand sometimes, and also according to various allegations, they have observed that sometimes the governors were actually seen as transforming the Raj Bhavans, or where the governors generally reside in a state. They have turned this particular Raj Bhavans into offices of political parties, because they are not being able to respect the amount or the quality of staying neutral in politics, because we have to understand the governor in a state has to maintain a dual role. That is, first, the constitutional head of the state, and adhering by the constitutional functions, which also imply the basic structure, which is the federalism, federal structure. Next, the dual character is that the governor is a link between the union and the center, and this is the particular aspect where the neutrality is sometimes breached. In the next case, there have been 120 times use of Article 356, that is the President's rule, since 1951. And this is another constitutional discretion which allows the governor to file a report to the central government in terms of any constitutional breakdown of machinery in a particular state government administration. And this is one of the cases where the central government may have been alleged to interfere by dismissing the elected state legislative assemblies. Next, according to Shamsher Singh case of 1974, the governor should not exercise the discretionary powers while withholding assent or returning a bill to the state legislature. And this we have to understand. The issue is what? Because the governors often ignore the advice of the state cabinet, right, with respect to the passing of the bill. And again, this discretion is not particularly absolute. The same Supreme Court case has told that this is not a particular discretion. You have to obey by the advice of the state cabinet. And also there is another loophole in the same, that the constitution does not lay down any time limit for the assent. And this is also a case for further committee recommendations which we will be seeing. Then, as I have already told, the Nibam Ravia judgment told that there is no general discretion, but in recent times there have been allegations that the same things are being followed irrespective of the Supreme Court judgments. And finally, there have been instances, particularly in the Maharashtra Assembly, where the governor has been deciding the time of, say, calling the house for determining the confidence of the state legislative assembly, or determining which particular political party will be, say, called for vote first and second and third and so on. This is actually very, very trivial, and the governor should not be doing the same. And this is, one of the allegations, and interfering with this is actually interfering with democracy, because the SLA is a democratically elected body. Now, the way forward, the very first simple way forward is that chief ministers should be consulted before the appointment of any governor of a particular state. These have been the recommendation of various experts. The second recommendation is that the government can be given a particular opportunity, or say there must be a particular amendment in the constitution where this provision can be inserted, that they can be removed by impeachment by the state legislature assembly, because there can be some governors who are interfering in the particular states affairs, administration, legislatures. So if they find this particular thing, they can impeach. And according to various commissions such as Sarkaria Commission recommendations, they say that the governor should discharge his functions as per the advice of the ministers. They should be doing the same. And discretion, in cases of discretion, they must be using the discretion in the rarest of rarest cases, and this is implying that the personal values of neutrality, honesty, integrity of the governors should be very high, and that is why there is also one recommendation that the governor should be a very high public figure. Next, president's withholding assents. When the governor is referring the bill to the president, the reasons for the withholding must be communicated to the state government within a particular period of time. Next, according to Pucci Commission recommendation, governor should take a decision within 6 months with respect to the bills, because we have seen there is no particular time limit for the same. And finally, we have to understand the governor. Also, in the same thing, the Supreme Court have told that the chief minister and the governor together, they must be doing some soul searching, or they must be finding a resolution of their disputes. And in the same, they must be serving as a friend, philosopher and guide for the state government, because there are link between the center and the state, and also they are the constitutional heads of a particular state, and they are also people with good experience of public life and so on. So they must be helping the state governments, but also maintaining the unity and integrity of India. There have been various recommendations by various chief ministers that the governor post should be totally removed. That is not a good recommendation. That is why we have to understand the balance and moderating aspect of the same must be there. Next, the governor should be also respecting the federal structure of the constitution, because it is a basic structure. And finally, the governors must respect elected governments, because they have to, at the end of the day, we have to understand that governor is not democratically selected. The chief minister, their council of ministers, their MPs, or their MLAs, they are actually democratically elected via universal franchise, and that is why we have to understand that this is a particularly important aspect that the governors should keep in their mind. Now, in the same aspect, I want you all to attempt this 2014 PYQs, where I have definitely given you the answers in my discussion. So all of you attempt this PYQ and give me the answer in the comments. In the next one, we will be looking at national awards. Very important and an offbeat topic for UPSC, because some of us know that the UPSC generally do not ask questions on awards, sports and so on, but there have been some questions on the same. That is why we must be discussing, because more prominently the one of the most senior political leaders of BJP, L. Kadwani ji, has been awarded the Bharat Ratna, and this is very important for us to understand with respect to prelims in current events of national and international importance. Now here, we will be looking at these awards in 3 categories. First, the civilian awards, then the gallantry awards, and finally the sports awards. These are the major awards here. Now, the very first and the highest kind of award that a particular individual, in India can attain is the Bharat Ratna. Now, let me tell you, it is not only for Indians per se, because naturalized Indians such as Mother Teresa, they have been also awarded Bharat Ratna, and it is the highest civilian award instituted in the year 1954. This is a particular award. As you can see, the medallion is here, and this is given to persons of eminence in any field of human endeavor, and there can be a maximum of 3 in a particular year. This is the particular limit. Then the recipient receives the sanad, which is a certificate signed by the President of India, and also a medallion, as we can see here. The recommendations are given by whom in a particular year? By the Prime Minister to the President, and this is generally via an informal way. And let me tell you, a very interesting fact is that the Bharat Ratna is the people, or the Indians, or the citizens, or the people, right, who with Bharat Ratna ranks 7th in order of precedence. Order of precedence, we have to understand the first in precedence is the President, and you tell me in the comments up to 7th who are the people here. Next, we have to understand the very first recipients, Lord Mountbatten and C. Rajagopalachari, S. Radhakrishnan, C. V. Raman. These were the first recipients, first 4 recipients. And let me tell you, since 1954, more or less, the Bharat Ratna and also the Padma awards were given without any interruptions, but there were 2 interruptions. First, in this particular time when Morarji Desai was totally against giving personal awards and civilian awards and so on. So that in that particular period of time, the Bharat Ratna and all these particular awards were stopped. And also in this particular time period of 1990s, when PILs were actually going on in various states such as Madhya Pradesh regarding the constitutionality of this particular Bharat Ratna and Padma awards. And let me tell you, this is not, and the outcome of the case has been that these awards are not the, say, titles, and that is why they have to understand that people cannot be using this to discriminate using their titles of these awards. And this is also this if the people uses the same, that will be a violation of their fundamental rights. And let me tell you, the next is award related to the Padma awards. The highest, the order of the highest to the lowest amount of significance in this Padma awards is shown as Vibhushan, Bhushan and Shri. That means Padma Vibhushan is the highest among Padma awards, followed by Padma Bhushan and Padma Shri. This was also instituted since 1954, and this was on the occasion of the Republic Day. And at least for 5 years must pass for example, a particular person with Padma Shri to be given a Padma Bhushan, and 5 years from Bhushan to Vibhushan. So this is the particular aspect. Next, the maximum of 120 of Padma awards can be given a particular year. Now in this particular color code we can see this is the Padma Vibhushan, this is the Padma Bhushan, and this is the Padma Shri. These are the actually medallions and the various medals that were given in this particular award. Next we have gallantry awards. In gallantry awards we have two categories, the wartime and the peacetime. The wartime are actually, say, ordered from highest to lowest of precedence. There is a Paramveer Chakra, which is significant to the Victoria Cross, which were conferred to India in the Second World War. Then we have Mahavir Chakra and the Veer Chakra. The peacetime awards were the Ashok Chakra, Kirti Chakra and Shaurya Chakra. Now with respect to the sports, we have other awards such as the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award, which is the highest of degree in sports activities of the last 4 years, followed by Arjuna Award, which is just in second in rank. People with Arjuna awards can be qualified for the Khel Ratna and not vice versa. Next, Dronacharya is for actually coaches who have given medals to Indian sports contributions. We have Major Dhyan Chand Award, which is for good performance and promotion of sports in the country. Next we have Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Trophy to universities for inter-university, inter-college tournaments. Next we have Rashtriya Khel Protsahan Puruskar to organization individuals for their post-promotion around for the last of the 3 years. And finally we have an award for adventure sports such as on land, air, water, given the name of Tenzing Norway National Adventure Award. Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award is the same. Now, after discussing all the same, you let me know what is the answers of these two PYQs. This is from 2021, this is from 2023. So you tell me which of the questions answers in the comments. Finally, in the last discussion we will be discussing about NITISH. This is actually developed by the IIT Patna and Bihar State Disaster Management Authority. And this particular is very, very important for our disaster management and also the level of amount of preparedness as a particular state government, national government has to take with respect to human lives. And the full form is the Novel Initiative Technological Intervention for Safety of Human Lives. You need not memorize the same, but you can use this as case studies in your answers, and also very, very important for prelims. Now the significance is that since 2020, roughly 1,000 people died of lightning attacks, lightning strikes in Bihar, and around 450s were in 2020 year alone. So there are vulnerable people out there who die due to various natural and disasters such as lightning, and also flash floods and so on, which are becoming intensive over a period of time. That is why a very, very innovative device has been introduced right now, and this is actually to combat the deaths due to lightning, floods, heat waves, cold waves, and how this will operate. This is this particular device. This will be given to various peoples who are residing in a particular area, and say a particular heat wave is actually projected or flood is actually projected. A sound alert 30 minutes before will be given to the users. Apart from that, voice messages will also be given. The color will also be changing from green to red, and also this particular machines or device will be keep warming, and when this device is actually say present in your pockets and everywhere, you will be feeling a warm amount of sensation. This will be trying to give you some warnings before a particular disaster is striking. This is actually one of the various crucial applications of early systems, warning systems, and this will be getting charged from the body heat. Very important innovative device. And there is also a particular similar app known as Indra Vraj, which is also giving sounding similar alerts. Now please do use these particular examples in your answers, and this will be trying to enrich your answers at a positive level only. Now, these were all the articles for today. I thank you very much for being a very patient audience, and till we meet again, all the best for your future examination, and do attempt the quiz which is following up right now.